So I'd just like to welcome everybody to our online session. In the past, I've seen many of your faces in the council chamber, where we have the nice smell of red leather. But from the comfort of your own homes, I hope you find this evening's briefing useful. It's not just a double act, but a triple act. I'm going to lead off, and Anna Smith and also Mike on finances are going to cover a whole range of issues. So this is one of two briefings that we hold every November. So it's part of our process of engagement ahead of our budget setting, but it's just really an annual recap. And we also have one next week for community groups. So technology permitting, we'll start. So we've got a theme about Cambridge, which Mike will come on to further, and Mike will also cover aspects of the business recovery. So I'll lead off. Mike will look at the council's finances.
Recording in progress.
And as that message that you might have heard, we will be recording this session. So I hope you're happy with that. Obviously, if you've got an issue with that, you may, if you wanted to be anonymous, you could just remove your name. But we do want to record it because it's useful to share to those who are not able to be with us. So Mike Davey is our Executive Councillor for Finance and Resources. So Mike will cover the money issues for the council, and also what we need to do, which is we've got a transformation process, and that's badged our Cambridge, because essentially, as we will reference in today's briefing, but also in all of the work that we do, it's a partnership with yourselves. There's councillors on the call, but our particular audience this evening is different voices within the business community. Mike will also talk through what we've been doing in response to COVID, but also our efforts and recognition that we need to continue that work on economic recovery and economic development. I'll cover planning and also what's called city access, but I think the Greater Cambridge Partnership, who are leading this, are calling making connections. So that's really the whole issues of planning, but also transport. And Anna, who will take over at the end of this month as leader of the council, will look at what we're doing with businesses on a greener and fairer Cambridge. We will finish at 7:30 latest, and in the process, we will take about half of that time. But we're obviously going to make sure that we've got time for questions. We've had a couple of written questions from our good friends in the taxi trade, and I will include an answer to that. So these are just basically our sort of guidance. If you can turn off your mic if you're not speaking, and we'll do the same. When we finish the presentation, you'll be able to see a little bit like the normal Zoom. You'll be able to see the range of people who are on the call. If you do have a question during our contributions, please do put it into the chat. We'll take the questions that are on the chat first, and then we'll obviously, people could later on come in just by raising a hand. So we'll have plenty of time for questions. I do think we'll get to all of the questions. It may not be the case on the community sector briefing, where we've extended the meeting out in past times. As I said, the meeting is being recorded, and if you've got your mobile ready, just in case we have any technical issues, but hopefully we won't. So I hope you benefit from the evening, and we really do want to hear from you, as we have in having an earlier business survey. And we do so value the opportunity just to talk to and listen to people. And if people want to follow up either by phone or by having a meeting about a particular issue, that's also an option that we would value. So just a few reflections from me. As a council, we have no choice but to face up to the climate emergency. So we've heard plenty about COP26 in the last couple of weeks, and we've had representatives up there, including because we've got a lot of work underway, both generally but also particularly on food. So we do focus on the importance, and I think, as the Chief Health Officer said, the climate emergency is actually a bigger health emergency, potentially, even than COVID has been. But it's just a systemic threat to us, and that's why we all need to work together and treat this as an emergency. And fairness, because as a city, that's been one of our themes, One Cambridge Fair for All, in which we've really benefited from the work with businesses as well as the community sector. In short, we cannot sort out the city's issues unless we do this together. So that's been our theme. I think just reflecting on last year, I mean, at this time last year, we knew that there was a vaccine, but we had not been vaccinated. We also had considerable worries about not just the national economy, but the shape of the Cambridge economy. So we've got a lot of luck. We are a very lucky city, and that's why I've used this phrase, city of considerable magic, but it hasn't been magic for everybody. So I think that's just a theme for us, that we whether it's looking at people who are no longer able to claim the extra bonus on universal credit, or sectors of business. So Mike will talk about the city centre and what we're focusing on there. Our overall view is, if we're going to have a successful economy, all parts of it have to be clicking. We clearly haven't got overseas tourism back, and quite a lot of our sort of social economy is still rather stilted. It's good to see people back, but we continue to, as we've done with the upgrading of work on COVID in the last month, we just need to do things safely. So we are going to be here for those people and those sectors that need us, and we'll continue to work with partners on upskilling and addressing some of the economic challenges, including those that follow on from leaving the European Union, which we're grappling with. On a positive front, I do think, and I would say this partly because of the politics of working with the county council and the combined authority, but I do think we've got a much more cooperative culture between us and the county council and with the combined authority. We also have already had a superb partnership with South Cambridgeshire, and Cambridge and South Cambridge are to a great extent indivisible, and that's why, whether it's working on economic recovery or planning or a whole range of issues, it's been an essential partnership with South Cambridgeshire. And I do think that sort of greater Cambridge issue merits us to continue to put our case to government. So I think we've got some unique offers, and part of it is, even on levelling up, the discoveries and innovations in Cambridge helped create Raspberry Pi being developed and produced in South Wales, and quite a lot of the innovations that come out of Cambridge end up in industrial production in areas of the country that are less high growth than ourselves. So I think we've worked together on this before, and I just value the fact that on this call are some key partners that we need to work with in talking to government. We aren't seeing the arc kind of taking off in the government's view as we were hoping. Aspects like East-West Rail are critical in the future for Cambridge, but we are obviously hoping to see the unity that helped us win projects like Cambridge South Station and the investment in transport that we won, just generally being on government's list. And partnerships are how we work. And Mike will, I'll hand over to Mike and to talk about the finance. and also just that is the product of partnerships. Before I do, I'd just like to say I am not quite signing off yet, but being leader of this wonderful city for the past 7.5 years has been the greatest privilege of my work in the public service. I'm not going away, but I'm really proud to be handing over at the end of this month to Councillor Anna Smith, who's been my hard-working deputy for several years and has led on a whole range of council policies already. Fundamentally, you won't see a change because we're managing this transition, and I'll be supporting Anna in the future. But we are a council that we hope listens, and you'll find out whether you think that by the end of today. But I'll hand over now to my colleague Mike Davey, who's our Executive Councillor for Finance, and to talk about the money.
Hello everybody, I hope you can hear me okay. And Lewis, before I start, worth knowing you've got a bit of static when you're speaking, so I don't know if that's a volume issue or something when you're talking, so for later on it might be worth just knowing that that's happening. I don't know if I'm the only one that is picking that up. I think Naomi made a comment too. So anyway, I hope you can hear me, and if you can't, please let me know, and I can then try and do something to ensure that you can hear me. My name, as Lewis has said, is Mike Davey. I'm fortunate enough to be the City Councillor for Petersfield in the centre of the city. So Mill Road runs right through the middle of my ward, as does the station. I've been the Exec Councillor for Finance and Resources for the last 18 months, and I took over from Richard Robertson, who did a sterling job in managing the finances for a number of years and left us in a relatively strong position compared to other authorities. But it'd be fair to say, and I don't wish to make this a depressing speech, we're facing some really difficult decisions financially over the coming months and over the coming 5 years, but I'll come on to that a wee bit later on. The other bit worth saying is that before I start is that as part of my responsibilities, I also sit on the Cambridge Investment Partnership Board, the award-winning Cambridge Investment Partnership, which I think has delivered on all sorts of basic principles over the course of the last 3 or 4 years. And again, it speaks volumes for what Lewis has achieved within Cambridge, that we've actually been able to, as a result of the city deal, build the 500 council homes in conjunction with Hill, and also delivered the same number of housing for purchase. And it just shows, I think, demonstrates how the City Council works at its best with business to deliver outcomes for the city. And I think if there's anything else you take away from this evening, it's that would demonstrate our commitment to working with business and trying to meet the needs of people in the city, but also according to our own principles as a Labour group. But I think Anna will also come on to that later. So what I'm going to do during my brief input is to just go through some of the basics and then come on to some of the things I suspect you as business folk will want to talk about. So I thought it might be just useful just to remind people, what do we do as a city council? For those of you not immersed in local government bureaucracy, and if I'm honest, you're probably wise not to be immersed. We're what we call a second tier authority. We're the equivalent to a district council, but we're like no other district council I've ever come across in the kind of range and the value of things we undertake. We spend around £100 million per year on services. And if you look at the clock at the top there, if I start at sort of 11 o'clock and go anti-clockwise, we obviously deliver housing services for the 7,500 people who live in council accommodation. Again, we've maintained our council properties, which I think is a very positive thing. We collect council tax and business rates for the whole of the county. The council tax, we'll come on to the actual figures later, but clearly we only get a percentage of the amount that we collect, but our services there are vital for how the city keeps ticking over. We manage elections locally. A key element from our finances is car parking. We manage and own the car parks. And clearly from terms of the COVID process, we've taken a significant hit on what we've been able to take in terms of income from car parks. And that I'll come on to in a minute about the impact COVID's had on our finances. In terms of inspecting food, that's another part of our role. Clearly, we're involved in the planning process. And again, for those of you that aren't aware, the new local plan is currently being consulted upon. And we therefore are desperate to have and would encourage businesses to contribute to that. The consultation process began 10 days ago and will go on for another 5 weeks. And so please contribute as part of that, because your voices will be significant in how we plan, together with our colleagues from South Cambridgeshire, for the future. We manage and oversee park and open spaces. We are responsible for street cleaning and the environment. We're obviously, with South Cambs, we have a collective agreement around how we manage waste collection and bin collection. And within that, obviously, is the recycling. And the key bit, as I said, starting off at the 1 o'clock mark, we build council houses and we build new homes. And we're part of the planning process and the development for the city. And if anybody, certainly in the time that I've lived here, housing and homelessness has been a key issue, perhaps the most important issue for us as a council, for us as a city. And therefore to have, again, at the risk of repetition, have delivered 500 council houses for those least well off, and to deliver houses, for affordable houses and houses for purchase with our colleagues in KIP, has been really significant. And it's not just that we do them with KIP as part of the programme, we're obviously a key player in terms of planning for the future. So I hope that gives you a range of what we do from within the money that we spend, £100 million. So if I can go on to the next slide now, Lewis. Can I go on to this? Oh dear, here's where the technology breaks down. Oh, no, back one, Lewis, back one. No, there we go. No, there's one in between, I think, isn't there? I think you flicked on. Is that anyway? So, but again, this is the Cambridge declining spending power gives you a picture about what we've got over the course of the last 10 years. So if you look at the bottom axis, and from 2010 to 2021, you can see what we have now increasingly dependent upon council tax for our expenditure. But even within that, we're capped as the amount we can actually ask people to pay, and fairly obviously we would prefer not to be in that position, but we are. The bottom line is the key one, I think, in terms of government spending. You can see how that has decreased over the last 10 years. So we're no longer available to access government funding, and our spending power, as you can see, has gone along the middle there. And that's significant. People may not be aware of just how little we now get from central government towards the way we run our authority. Now, if I can at this point just mention COVID. During the course of the 18 months, as you can probably remember, Robert Jenrick, who was the minister at the time, now replaced by Michael Gove, promised that any money we would lose, or any money that costs the City Council, would be recouped from us. And we lost, it cost us somewhere in the region of £17 million over the period of COVID. And a lot of that was in terms of excess payments we had to make sure our communities were served effectively. But we also lost revenue, and it's the lost revenue that has never been recouped. So despite the promise made by Mr. Jenrick, we're still 7.5 million down on what we spent, or and what our projected income was. And as you can imagine, that has a really significant impact in terms of how we can plan for the future. So in addition to the reduction of government money, COVID has had an impact upon our finances now. And that is despite what I would argue is that COVID, response to COVID, demonstrated local government working at its very best. We were able to support communities, we were able to be involved closely with the mutual aid networks and work with the county council, the upper tier authority, to make sure those most vulnerable got support. So despite all that, we still end up losing money from central government, which is sad, but we have to face the reality. We are where we are, but obviously we campaign to see if we can recoup. So that's our declining spending power. We move on now to where our funding comes from. as I mentioned, if I start again going anti-clockwise, start from the top left, so it's at the 11 o'clock mark, whilst we collect somewhere in the region of £100 million of council tax from across the county, we actually only receive 9 million of that, which is our percentage of the gross budget within the council tax collection. In terms of government grants, we still do get government grants. It's just not set. It's 6.2 million. There may be our ability to access some money from levelling up, but I think it's unlikely, being honest, because as you can probably imagine, Cambridge is not a city that's perceived to be in need. And so therefore, it's unlikely we'll get access to those sorts of money. There might be some, but not many. In terms of business rates, key of interest to yourselves, we collect business rates and collect them from the city. We probably pull in somewhere of £100 million, but we only get 5.6 million of that. The rest goes back to central government, and they then divest the figures out according to the need across the country. In terms of commercial initiatives, we bring in about £4 million, interest and investment income, 1.5 million. You can see we get housing benefit subsidy, but that basically comes in and goes straight out again to those who are in need. Fees, charges and other income, 24 million, and the bulk of that, as I've mentioned already, comes from car parks. I'd say the bulk, somewhere around 30% of that comes from car parks, or has done in the past. And therefore, any hit on car parking hits our ability to deliver services. Now, we face a dilemma as an authority here about how we look at car parking, particularly with regards to trying to meet our commitment to climate change. So are we seeking to reduce car parking, thereby making air in the city clearer and cleaner? But if we do that, then we clearly have a knock-on impact upon the amount of money that comes in. So I think one of the key things to watch out for, particularly for businesses over the next couple of years, is how we as a council address that issue. It's one of those whereby whatever we do, we might lose, but I'm hoping that whatever we do might win, and win for the city. So that's a key area. Car parking, please be aware of. The final thing is commercial property. I think I have to say that despite a career in local government, I was surprised just by how much the city council is involved in commercial property within the city, both in terms of business, office, and also retail space. So that's quite a significant income. But again, as you will know probably better than anybody else, we've been hit by COVID as a result of that, and particularly about rental increase from retail stock in the city centre. So that's where our funding comes from, and it's quite a variety, but perhaps most important to note, very little from central government. Okay, thank you, Lewis. Do you want to go on to next slide?
I'm doing my best.
My glamorous assistant.
Well, the glamorous assistant needs to improve.
Oh, there we go. No. Oh, you jumped one, I'm afraid. Right, where the council money is spent, I won't spend too much on this, although I assume you'll be fairly aware. As I said, the housing benefits I've mentioned already, so that's at sort of 3 o'clock on your clock there. And again, going anti-clockwise, commercial property, 1.5, capital, contributions, corporate and democratic management costs, housing services, and there's a big chunk there, 5.8 million. Then we get into sort of what I would probably see as what the council does on a daily basis. So climate change, environment stuff, 9 million. Central services, including elections, tax collection, etc., 10 million. Transport, about 11 million. And then finally, communities, which is currently Anna's portfolio. She might want to expand on that, about 13 million. And within that, perhaps a key sector for business is culture. So we oversee and work with Cambridge Live, so the Corn Exchange. So we have a really significant role to play in the cultural offering for the city, which then has obviously knock-on impacts for how the city and the nighttime economy in the city operates. So again, you might want to ask us questions around that. Thank you, Lewis. Next slide. Now then, as Lewis has said earlier on in his introduction, and as I've indicated, the money coming into the authority is decreasing. And so therefore, as you can see from this graph, I hope you can see from this graph, if we start at 2023, we've actually got to make savings of 3 million, just because the money is just not there. It was this process is on the back of, again, without to make a political point, on the back of austerity, and then we're then facing these particular savings that we have to make just to mean we keep our head above water. And again, as I'm sure some of you will be aware, there are other authorities around the country who are in much more serious and significant issues than we are, and the most local one people probably be aware is Peterborough. So we've got really major challenge to do. This is to find, as you'll see by the end in 26, 27, cumulative savings, therefore, a significant amount, but we have to find £7 million, £7.5 million a year on a recurring basis, cumulative saving. And that is going to be quite a significant impact on how we deliver our services to Cambridge and to the city. So we have, I suppose, a major challenge. I won't dwell on that, but then go on to say what we're going to try and do about it. Lewis, again, please. Right, so we had two choices, I think. We either do it annually, reactively, looking at what budget we need to find, and then what we would call in local government salami slice of each department. And we felt as an authority that was, to an extent, burying our head in the sand, because what you then get is as an authority, a city council that isn't cohesive because it's lost bits everywhere, and it's not looking at how the council operates as a whole. So we've launched what we would call our Cambridge one, and it's based upon Fair for All, the city councils, if you like, Stratline, and it's about how we can look at what the council offers in 5 years' time, bearing in mind our priorities. There are three. Tackling poverty and inequality, climate change, and then the third one that's crept in now, which is financial sustainability, because it would be inappropriate and imprudent if the council didn't try to stay within our financial strictures. So what we're doing is, therefore, and this is just really just being launched over the course of the last 6 months, we've built a programme around delivering on our promises to the council and using the recovery not to dwell in COVID, but as an opportunity, and to work with yourselves in partnership, as Lewis has said, to try and look at how we might, what sort of city we want to look at and what sort of city council we'd like. So we're looking to build on the strengths that we have, because as I said earlier on, if anything demonstrated the strengths of the local authorities and our ability to work effectively, it's COVID. But ensuring we're also ready for the future. I think there's if I can say within this, is a kind of balance we have to achieve between being bold, which is, I suspect what people want, whilst at the same time just making sure we don't step too far and too quickly, because otherwise there's a danger we'll get ourselves into a pickle. And I think we're going to get criticism both ways, that we might be going too fast sometimes and too slow on other occasions, but nonetheless it's important that we work in partnership with our local authority partners, but also with businesses and the community to make sure we take this forward. And as Lewis moves us on neatly there, the programme aims are threefold. First of all, looking at our customers, making sure that we deliver proper and efficient services that best meet the needs of our customers. Secondly, to keep it quite community focused, so make sure we're serving our city. And finally, to make sure our staff, if we don't have our staff on board with this, we will not be effective. Okay, thank you, Lewis. So the Cambridge conversation that we're starting to engage in, the community engagement stuff, is about to begin in the new year. What are the aspirations and objectives we share for the city? How can we work together to tackle these key challenges that the city faces and build on opportunities? And finally, how can we bring together and continue to grow the skills and knowledges of our communities, businesses and residents? And I think, again, what we would recognise probably from COVID is that there's a real and urgent need to look at the skills available to businesses within the city. It's in our interest to make sure people are in work. It's therefore in our interests to work with businesses to bring people into work. And therefore we need to work with those who deliver training to make sure that the appropriate training is in place, so that you as businesses are able to benefit from and then deliver the kind of things we need to make Cambridge prosperous. Thank you, Lewis. So what do we do specifically to support Cambridge businesses? I think there's three basic things worthwhile just stressing. I won't go into detail. Fairly clearly, there's business rates relief. which has always been an important tenet to what we've done. But perhaps that's been exacerbated through the COVID, and the second block is therefore absolutely vital. I think sometimes bureaucracy and administration is perceived just as a bad thing. If we hadn't, over the last 18 months, got this money out to you from central government, then there'd have been more of a pickle, I think, for businesses within the city. And I think one of the things I'm really proud of is the way Fiona Bryant and her team have been able to deliver against this and have ensured that you get your money quickly and on time and effectively and efficiently with the minimum of bureaucracy. And so over the last 18 months, I hope this has been the case for you as recipients. If it's not, I'd like to know. But nonetheless, that's the middle block's perhaps been the most important thing we've done over the last 18 months. And finally, through Dave Princep and his team, support for our commercial tenants to make sure we've been flexible and responsive during their needs now, but also in the future, and looking at how we can support and play our role, not just in terms of support for business, but also in terms of our role as a business delivering to commercial tenants, be it Lion Yard, be it the Grafton or wherever. And we have a big, I think, a more significant role than, as I said earlier, I'd ever anticipated in that particular work. Thank you, Lewis. So in terms of specific initiatives that we've got undertaking with regard to recovery renewal, we've appointed a new economic development and recovery manager who will be working with yourselves in the near future to look at what you need from us. Housing, we've already mentioned, and I don't want to go on about that, but I think we have a real role to play in how we can deliver sustainable and green housing within the city, and I think that's perhaps our main role, because that goes from one post into thousands of homes. And then the third bit is about how we offer and continue to offer recovery grants, be that through growth support for Cambridge business, the green grants, or the extension of the Cambridge Bid Digital Support Grant. The bit that, my apologies, the bit I think is missing is our role with the combined authority around skills, which I just alluded to, because I think there's things we can do to influence on your behalf what the new mayor, Dr. Nick Johnson, wants to achieve, because he has responsibility for skills training and that area of work, which again is really vital that we make sure that Cambridge gets its voice. Without, again, we should go into the geographic politics. Invariably, because there's more deprivation in the north of the county, Cambridge can sometimes get lost, but because we're the real regenerative hub for the county, it's really important we're able to deliver according to the requirements of what you businesses want. Okay, thank you, Lewis. And that's where I end. So thank you very much. If you have any questions for me, please, I look forward to receiving them later on. And I hand over now, I think, to Andrew Lim. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mike. So Andrew's going to take us through the recent business survey that we've done. And I didn't mention it at the beginning, but we've got a series of sort of questions using Menti, which Andrew will also explain, but they're not heavy questions. They're just to get us some of your experiences from COVID and some of your views going forward. So I'll hand over to Andrew Lim. Andrew is one of hundreds of people who work for us, but he leads a whole team of people and has done a sterling job through COVID and is now leading us on looking forward and is head of our corporate strategy. Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you, Lewis. So yeah, we sent a link to a survey when we sent out the invitation to this event, and a number of you responded. So we just thought we'd kind of share back to you what the kind of key themes emerging were. Probably not surprising, businesses were grateful for the support the council had provided on particularly ensuring that businesses could reopen again safely in the context of COVID. And an awful lot of work did go into that from a lot of teams across the council to make sure that you'll remember all the kind of trying to kind of create safe one-way systems and kind of other things we put in place to make sure that businesses understood what they needed to do to be compliant with government guidance, but also to make sure that shoppers and other kind of people coming into the city were safe and kind of felt encouraged to come back as well. But also the support that we provided directly to businesses through our grants program that Mike's talked about earlier. So we asked people kind of what things did you value the most and what would you prioritise. So again, fairly consistent theme over the years. If everybody could go on mute, that would help the rest of us. Thank you. again, people tend to prioritise fairly consistently over the years maintaining environment, so making sure that the city centre, the city as a whole, is kept clean and tidy. But also, people value the fact that the council and through our shared planning service with South Cambridgeshire is actively planning for the future and planning for a sustainable and inclusive future in the way that they are seeking to kind of think about the spatial strategy and the types of housing that will be built and space for business growth as well. And people also, business respondents to the survey, kind of value what the council does in housing, which Mike again has talked about, both in terms of managing our existing stock, but also building new council housing and making sure that housing is affordable to people on a range of incomes. Hugely important issue, as you know, for housing the workforce of the future, but also making sure it is a fair and inclusive city where everyone can be kept safe in decent housing. We asked what people thought would be the biggest barrier to a green and fair recovery. And perhaps not surprisingly, issues around labour supply and skills came out as the top, I think by some way, the top issue. It's a very tight labour market at the moment in this part of the country. People are finding it difficult to recruit at all, but particularly people with the right kind of skills and experience. So that comes back again to the critical importance of the skills strategy, which our colleagues at the Combined Authority are developing at the moment, and our work through the GCP, through Form the Future, on making sure that there's an appropriate supply of apprentices with the right kind of skills coming forward as well. And of course, you as businesses have a role to play in making sure that training providers understand the skills that you require and that those are supported through apprenticeships and other methods as well. The priorities for recovery, again, so therefore, again, not surprising around skills, but also transport. And I'm sure, I think Lewis is going to talk a bit more about the GCP's proposals around that shortly, and tackling inequality, which again has been a kind of key theme for this council for many years. We all want to, we know the statistic about being the most unequal city in the UK. That does reflect that it's a prosperous city, but it's a kind of statistic which galvanises all into action in the context of a city with kind of so many people dependent on food banks and the issues we've had around homelessness over the years. So we are working on the things that you're doing in the context of COP26 that businesses say they're already working on in terms of reducing their own carbon footprint. Tackling waste is one of the things that people are already getting to grips with, but what people want to do more of was around renewables, retrofitting their existing buildings and so on, and using local suppliers more, which is a really key thing, reducing the kind of carbon footprint of your labour, of your supply chain. So those are the headlines. We'd like to find out how to encourage more of you to respond in the future. Maybe some of you are kind of surveyed out. But anyway, we wanted to play that back to you, and it's very grateful for all of those who did complete the survey, which is useful for councils as they come to thinking about priorities for budget and future services.
So thank you for the comments that you've given us. We hope this might prompt a few more. So if you have got particular comments, then do email myself or others at the council, and we can share those in. I'm going to hopefully on to the next.
Shall I do the Menti? Yeah. Okay. So if you've got your phone to hand, or if you're clever enough to open up a different browser or have a separate screen, then go to www.menti.com. And when you get there, you should be prompted to enter a code. The code is 38028361.
So if I stop sharing this,
I start sharing my thing, which should be, yeah. If I can get rid of that. Oops, no, that's not right. There we go.
Can we have the number back again quickly, Andrew?
So it's 38028361. First questions are fairly kind of simple. And these aren't, as Lewis said, these aren't heavy duty questions. We just want to make this evening's session a bit more interactive, give you a chance to kind of tell us very quickly some thoughts on a couple of issues. So this one's just asking, do you think in a year's time people will be back in their workplace as it was before COVID by then? Or do you think the current experience of more flexible and remote working will stick and become more of a feature into the future? So it looks like pretty much everybody has given their view. And there's a fairly clear message there that people are anticipating that we will be continuing in this kind of remote world for a bit longer, and maybe to quite a significant extent. So it's a bit of crystal ball gazing. Clearly, we've still got a very live COVID problem at the moment, and that's influencing people's behaviour. Cambridge's rates have generally been lower than some other parts of the country over the last year or two, partly because the type of work that people do in Cambridge, there's more people able to work from home, and that's probably prevented people kind of coming into workplaces and mixing so much. So there's kind of been a public health benefit of that, but obviously there's other kind of consequences and impacts as well. But that's a very interesting kind of clear steer. Now then, we need to move on to the next question. How do I do that? He says, I should have practiced this before, shouldn't I? Oops.
Hover over those controls again at the bottom where you were, and that's the forward arrow.
Brilliant. Thank you to my kind of highly skilled assistant. Apologies for the delay. So there we go. Next question. Again, this is kind of simply coming back to how strongly you agree with some of these statements about the current business environment. And I'm sorry that they've kind of been framed with a deficit kind of language, but anyway, just interested to get your views on those. Okay, well, that's coming out, and again, perhaps unsurprisingly, chiming very much with what came through in our online survey, that it's clearly recruitment and skills that are kind of key issues. Supply is quite significant as well, which isn't surprising, because as a council, we also buy a lot of things, you know, to build houses, we need materials and so on, and we are finding that some of those are in short supply. We were successful in bidding some government money to take some of the fossil fuels out of the way that we heat their swimming pools at Parkside. But we've been waiting for our air source heat pump for a long time, and that may be linked to kind of the semiconductor issues around the world as well. So anyway, not surprising that some supplies is coming through, but it's really clearly it's the recruitment and skills issues coming through very strongly. Thank you for that. Moving on to the next one. So this is just kind of interested in your thinking about your own business and your recovery plans for the year ahead. Are you just struggling to survive, or are you more optimistic and thinking about growing the business, or have you got other priorities? I should have had another category, shouldn't I? But anyway, of those ones, what's key for you in the year ahead? Well, that's interesting. That looks like the scores more or less come through. And clearly there is a significant proportion of businesses in the city for whom survival is still very much at the forefront of their minds, and we're understanding of that. And we want to continue to doing the things we can to help people stay in business. But interesting that there's a lot of optimism and obviously Cambridge type dynamism, people keen to grow the business, which is fantastic. And again, I'm sure the kind of combined authorities growth hub is there to help support that, and we through our own services will look to support that as well, including with the new economic development manager and the rest of the council's team. But becoming more sustainable, there you are. It looks like it's on top, which in the middle of COP26 is kind of important to see as well, and we're keen to support and work with you on that. We have a city leaders group around climate change, which a number of you will be involved in, and we're very keen to kind of work in partnership with businesses on helping you become more sustainable going forward. But interesting again, that digitising is kind of a key challenge as well, and I think there is support from that through grant funding, I think from the combined authority and others as well. I think through the city councils has a couple of grant streams coming online very soon. So there's a green business grant coming available soon to help you get on the road to that. But also I think digitising again as well, we have further support for that. And we work in partnership with our colleagues at Connecting Cambridgeshire to make sure that the actual infrastructure, the kind of mobile and broadband and so on, and gigabit connectivity is strong in Cambridge and the surrounding area as well. So that's great. And the final one, something a little bit different, thinking about the future, and we've described our ambitions around a greener and fairer city. What 3 words best describe the Cambridge you'd like to see in, say, 5 years' time? What sort of place should we collectively, as the heart of Cambridge, be aiming to achieve? What are your ambitions? What do you want to see Cambridge like? So just throw up any words that are in your mind of the sort of place you want to live and work. it will appear in a beautiful graphic. So I'm sure most of you will be familiar with this kind of thing. The bigger the word, the more people are saying it. So again, really heartening to see sustainable right at the middle of that. I think that's absolutely fundamental, but a lot of support for fairer, inclusive. Vibrant and welcoming, as Cambridge has always been. Brilliant, healthier as well, really important. Hugely important given the health inequalities that have been worsened during COVID. Very much in our mind as well. Happy would be nice, wouldn't it? We'll do our best. I think that's okay for me now, Lewis. So thank you everyone for taking part in that. I hope that's given you a chance to kind of engage in the evening's event, and we'll look forward to more questions later on. Thank you again to everyone who completed the survey. It's really important to us to hear your thoughts. And I think, you know, through the Our Cambridge programme that Mike described earlier, we're really keen to kind of extend and expand the ways that we engage and listen to businesses and communities across the piece, so we work together to build the future. Thank you.
Well, thanks for all your input. Am I still getting static, Andrew?
It's not too bad. It seems better now.
Okay. So I want to just cover in relatively short period of time both planning and transport as a city. You'll probably be aware that there's an interim consultation on draft proposals for the local plan. As I mentioned before, Life for Us is a partnership, particularly with South Cambridgeshire, because our community, our environmental challenges, our economy are all interlinked. So I do hope that you'll get the opportunity to have a look at that document that's been issued. So if you look at some of the draft objectives, which include facing up to the climate emergency and focusing on net zero new construction, that implies we also have to look at what we're doing at the moment. We do want to have a successful economy, a whole range of different jobs, and build on the massive strengths that we've got as a city in both high tech and biotech. We want to have a lively city, but we do want to protect those elements that are the best part of Cambridge. So, and through COVID, we've been reminded how precious both the living space that people have in their own homes and this aspiration to have more space, but also just the importance of the wider public realm in a city as well provided. So the four themes that were in the earlier consultation remain: climate change, biodiversity, the opportunities of having a much more rich environment and of just improving the environment around the city, well-being, and that's a big theme as surveys have shown for attracting people to Cambridge and retaining, but also a sense of place, of great places. So in the map here, you can see in orange the fact that the new plan isn't like a total new plan, it's a supplementary plan, because we've got roughly 34,000 homes in progress, and quite a large proportion of those, including the orange circles, are still to be built. And as was mentioned in the chat, we'll make these slides available, but some more information is clearly available on the local plan consultation. So we've got essentially the same strategy that we've had of growing within Cambridge, but also of connecting key settlements, so Waterbeach, Northstowe, Cambourne, the wider community outside of Cambridge, and the critical aspect of transport links there. But here in purple, you've got greater emphasis on northeast Cambridge and on the east of Cambridge in the next local plan. as well as expanding further Camborne. So it's not in some ways a high housing growth scenario, but it is assisting significant jobs growth, and not necessarily all of the jobs based in Cambridge, but this flexibility and new ways of working, which means a lot of companies are engaging with people working some distance away. I wouldn't say completely outside Britain, but definitely much more geographically spread. So do have a look at the detail of the proposals there, both for sites for homes and sites for jobs, and critical employment sites. So the future of the biomedical campus and the other employment sites that need to grow and develop, as well as be sustainable. So these are some of the growth areas. Northeast Cambridge, near Cambridge North Station, east of Cambridge, the airport, albeit that the proposals in the plan are under 3,000 homes in the next phase. But a close working with Marshall as well, because aspects like engineering are critical. So even if, as there is discussions, Marshall are looking to relocate their airport and aeronautics to Cranfield and Bedfordshire, retaining other jobs, and Marshall have committed to continuing their land-based and other engineering. West of Cambridge, I do pay tribute to the university's boldness and the quality of the development that they've enabled there, and how that links to the growth that they will have of jobs in West Cambridge, the investments in the Cavendish Laboratory, and this wonderful three-way partnership that we've got on the biomedical campus of it will be 5 hospitals, and I think I'm including the Rosie as a hospital there, but a new cancer hospital. I think it becomes 6 hospitals, with the Children's Hospital adding to Papworth being based there. But that health delivery linked to the research, both from the university and from the private sector and the major research establishments that are already there. And then the world-leading companies of AstraZeneca, of a whole range of biomed and other health-related companies in and near there. So it's a really critical three-way partnership. We've put the Beehive Centre on there because sites like that and the Grafton Centre will not necessarily be exactly the same as they are now, albeit that we are committed to retaining retail as well as widening the range of activity. The Abbey Stadium and its future, Shire Hall. I prefer if we had the county council based in the biggest town and city, but that is obviously an area of redevelopment. But if you look at the map behind here, you've got also a real ambition, and it's endorsed by South Cambridgeshire, to have big projects so that we do better for the Cam and for its chalk streams and tributaries, that we are not just in the city but out into South Cambridgeshire committed to a much greater growth of tree cover, critical for biodiversity, but also critical for climate change, and the richness of the fen environment to the north of the city. So I would hope that we see 2 or 3 really big biodiversity projects, as well as a critical recognition of our green infrastructure. So transport, and that's been a big theme for several of the people on this call, and Stagecoach were on the chat asking about travel patterns into the future. Rail, Cambridge North, the new Cambridge South, the commitment of the Greater Cambridge Partnership to critical transport infrastructure to enable fast, reliable transport out to the west, to Camborne, out to the southeast, to Babraham area, and a new route which we are expecting to come from the Science Park area up to Waterbeach, if you look at the top of this, but also just our continued ambition for rail and our continued ambition for a second city deal, because the job isn't done, albeit that we've done an awful lot of development work, and we're doing further work on cycling and walking and in the city centre. So there's a mention here of a station east of Cambridge. I do think that that's a critical next ask, including for the wider community, but also to ensure that development in the east of the city is sustainable. So making connections is the consultation that's out there from the Greater Cambridge Partnership. So please do look at their website. There's just so many multiple benefits, both for our existing community, for lowering carbon emissions, and for making easy, reliable transport. As Mike Davey mentioned, it's a critical partnership with the Combined Authority. The Combined Authority has powers including bus franchising and wider bus powers. This is a partnership with Stagecoach and other providers. It's an ambition to have bus services that stretch way out into the county along the key routes. This isn't just about Greater Cambridge, but it is critical that we have that wider early improvement in bus services. So part of the discussion, and I've headed this cleaner air, better buses, fewer cars. If you look at, as I do on Twitter, at the patterns of problems with the road system in the morning and the evening, we are already at the limits. We have a hesitant public about public transport, but people are coming back to buses, back to trains, and we need to continue that now that it's safe to travel by bus again. So the consultation is basically saying we have to raise funds. If we're going to have that enhanced bus network, if we're going to have the reduction in cars, we have to look at the options here, which include a pollution charge or a flexible charge, because government ain't going to give us the money. The earlier mayor's project of a metro was missing the key element, which was how is it going to get funded? And this is a practical way in the next period of time, not 2035 or 2040, to address the key challenge, which is that Cambridge doesn't work transport-wise, and it has to be a partnership. But there is now the opportunity for people to have their say. So have their say, I hope you will. And this is the link to the consultation. Do have a look at that consultation, because we do need to crack the transport challenge. We do need to have, as I've said, cleaner air. We definitely need to have a reliable public transport system. We need to have that transfer of people coming into the edge of Cambridge onto the system, and enable us to have a better city. It ain't good for people to be stuck in traffic for half an hour even, in just in terms of added time on those daily journeys. We've obviously got quite a lot of opportunity for people to work remotely, and I'm sure people will do that. But we've got a major transport challenge. So I've talked very briefly about that, but please do take part in the online events, because if you look at the Greater Cambridge Partnership site, and if you look at our local plan site, there's significant engagement events on both. So do, if you want to know more, join into those. I'm going to hand over to my successor, who's been my excellent deputy leader, Anna Smith. And Anna's going to have a look in the last section of this presentation at work we're doing with businesses, and that will be looking at greener and fairer Cambridge. So handing over to you, Anna.
Thanks. And I should say that, as I mentioned at the beginning, I actually can't see myself on the small screen at the bottom of the iPad. So if someone shouts at me, if you've just got part of my head, that would be really helpful. Otherwise, assume you can see and hear me. I did just want to start briefly by thanking Lewis. He's going to be an incredibly hard act to follow. We've all appreciated his very wise leadership of this city for many years. And if I can be half as good a leader as Lewis has been, I'll be very proud of what I've achieved. Can I also say it's wonderful to see you all, and Afzal, thank you so much. That's really helpful to let me know that. It's wonderful to see you all, and also to see all the networking that's happening in the chat. That's brilliant, and it's wonderful that even though we're online, that's still happening. It's would obviously be wonderful if we could be face to face, but it's good to see that taking place. I'm going to try to be quite brief because we want to leave time for questions at the end. So first of all, just a few thoughts, and this really is a few thoughts. There's a lot more we could say around this slide. There's a lot more we will be saying, but looking at what you were saying earlier in the Mentimeter polls, that sustainability is absolutely crucial. Now, obviously, there's a lot of different aspects to that. Part of that, of course, is being a greener city. And we'd really encourage you, and we know many people are doing this, to think around calculating your carbon footprint, looking at what you can do with your building, looking at what you can do with your supply chain, but also getting involved in the Cambridge Climate Change Charter, which is a reasonably recent initiative. I know a lot of people here are involved in this already. And it's a really powerful way to be able to pledge to play a part. Have to say, I was particularly excited to see what's going on at Regent Street. Claire, you mentioned that earlier. I used to work partly in those offices, and so I'm really looking forward to seeing how that's going to be transformed into a really green, environmentally friendly building. Lewis, if you could just pop on to the next slide, please. And Afzal, thank you. Yes, the example of the taxis is absolutely terrific. Oh, I think you may have clicked on the link, Lewis. Perfect, there we are. No, one before. That's the one. Now, I suspect that I'm preaching to the converted here, because I would imagine that almost everyone in this room is doing a lot of this. In fact, I know people are. So one of the things I want to say to this slide is thank you, because the work that our local business community have been doing to support our city and to help our city become a fairer city has been absolutely wonderful. So many of you have made so many contributions during COVID. So many of you have got that commitment to be a really strong employer, which is just wonderful. So we've got living wage accredited businesses here. We have businesses who are establishing a fund with the Cambridgeshire Community Foundation, and we can say a little bit more about that if you'd like to know more. It's a really helpful way if you want to make donations to the community but don't want to manage that fund entirely by yourself. This is a really good option. Donating used IT equipment via Cambridge Online, that will go to excellent causes, particularly families who are not able to get online. Donations of food, employee volunteering, apprenticeships and training, our equality pledge. And as I said, I know that there are so many people here that, despite the tough times we've had, are so strongly involved in helping us build a more sustainable and a fairer city. And I really want to thank you for that. Lewis, I'm going to go on to the last slide just to bring a few closing remarks here. Oh, sorry, I forgot this one. There is a key date for your diary coming up. If you'd like to find more about how you can tackle poverty, tackle inequality in our city, we've got an event coming up next week. Just that one, thank you. Between 5 and 7 on the 16th. Please do contact Helen Crowther, who's actually also supporting this presentation tonight. If you'd like to find out more and attend that, that'll be an online event, and you'll hear from a range of really helpful groups, including the Living Wage Foundation. Okay, so last slide now, please, Lewis, thank you. So I just wanted to, I get the pleasure and privilege of drawing some of our thoughts to a close before we open out to questions. So I said thank you. And I also wanted to say how really proud I am of our vibrant economy and the commitment that so many of you have got to a green future and a fair future. And we've seen that commitment in the polls tonight. I did also, however, want to acknowledge just how tough the last 18 months have been. I mean, they've been tough for all of us, but I know particularly how tough those 18 months have been for businesses. And we know that there are businesses who would have been here 2 years ago, who sadly will not be here tonight because they've not made it through COVID. And I know there will be others here who are wondering just how much more uncertainty and difficulty you can face with so many things coming at once. So I did want to acknowledge that. And I hope that we can all work together in the months and years to come. We want to do what we can to support you. And you heard a little bit more from Mike about some of the plans we have for that. And we want to work in partnership for the good of our whole city. And I'm looking forward to meeting with as many of you as possible over the coming months to talk more about how we can work together in that way. So you might be wondering why I put this particular picture up on the screen. This is a picture of the handover of the giant key to symbolise the completion of some of our new council homes at Ironworks. And I'm very glad to say that giant key is getting a lot of work at the moment, because today we were at Timberworks, the other side of Mill Road Bridge, handing over the key to some of our Cromwell Road developments too. But I think this really sums up where we want to be as a city. So it sums up our commitment to being inclusive, to build really fantastic quality council homes alongside fantastic quality private homes. Our commitment to being green, because we're looking to make all of our housing sites as environmentally friendly as we can. We've got some great plans ahead. We have planning permission in for our first eco home, passive house homes coming up, for example. It's also about meeting needs. And a lot of you mentioned that recruitment is one of the hardest things at the moment. And we're really aware how expensive Cambridge is to live in. And projects like this are helping provide houses for the people who live and work in our city at an affordable level. It's about partnership too. So in that picture, we have representatives of councillors, of council officers, and from Hill, because they're in partnership with us in the KIP, the Cambridge Investment Partnership. And that's a real symbol of how we do want to work in partnership in the city. Now, I became a councillor in 2014, and the tagline One Cambridge Fair for All was already established. I think it's a fabulous tagline for our administration, because we can all benefit from a city that thrives. And we've got such a strong desire in this city for us all to work together to ensure that everybody benefits from that thriving city. So I'm looking forward to meeting as many of you as I can, online or face-to-face, working in partnership with you and working in partnership with our whole city to really ensure that we do all we can to build One Cambridge Fair for All. And with that, I believe we are going to go on to questions. So over to you, Lau Lewis, please.
Thank you. I hope you found that useful. I mean, I just reflect on what we've covered in the last year, and I mean, I'm proud to be a part of a Cambridge community that worked so well together, and that's in no small measure down to not just our staff who did a lot of work, but people on this call. So in terms of some of the themes that you could see on the chat, we've had an exchange on the relative roles of the council, and particularly an inspiring document produced by a very insightful team for the Combined Authority on the climate change challenges. We can't deal with that as a city by ourselves, and clearly there's some issues that are big, like energy or water or agriculture, where those issues and food, those issues can only really be addressed as a group of communities and all of the businesses and individuals that are involved. So I think we answered some of that, Jane, on the chat. We also had a discussion prompted by David and Stagecoach of exactly how the role of transport there plays its part. And I think there's several web links there, including from Cambridge Clean Tech, just emphasising the strength of those networks, the business networks of Cambridge Ahead, Cambridge Network, Cambridge Clean Tech, the Federation of Small Businesses, all of the businesses involved in the city centre, as well as groups including the taxi drivers. So the taxi driver group did submit some questions in advance, and we've worked up a much fuller answer in response. Essentially, some of the issues were about electric charging, where we've got a network for taxi drivers of 12 electric charging points, which are currently uniquely for taxi drivers. I think we're happy to have a discussion with the taxi drivers, but our information is that there's quite a lot of availability of those points. If we do see the public are using them, then we address them. There was a question also in relation to the fact that, as people will notice around Cambridge, we've got a particular licensing to a very high standard of taxis and private hire cars in the city centre and by Cambridge. So we've got the commitment, as the taxi drivers have mentioned, that we need to have either near zero emission vehicles or electric vehicles for all new taxis that are now being registered, which is a high bar. And I think the taxi firms are concerned that the standards are not as high, including from firms coming in from a long distance. We work closely with South Cambridgeshire, and one of our colleagues, Councillor Milnes of South Cambridgeshire, is on the call to just ensure that we're working together on the similar standards. So we will provide a fuller answer, Ahmed and others, on those. We do want those electric charging points to be in the future available, but they're reserved for taxi drivers. We're on a development this afternoon, our new development off Cromwell Road, where each house on the street has got their own electric charging point, and that's obviously a feature that's going to be in a lot more developments. But I think we started in Chesterton and Abbey, putting out charging points across both of those wards, where that's a partnership with the county council who are doing the main part of the work. But clearly, electric charging is a major issue, and we will be addressing that. So we've had quite a lot of issues answered on the chat, but I don't know if anybody just wants to raise a hand if they want to follow up one of those issues or ask a totally different question, either on the presentation or other issues where you feel that the City Council should be taking note. So does anybody want to prompt a question? Or do any of the people who put something on the chat, Jane or David or others, want to come in?
I'll come in, Lewis. It's Jane here. Jane Patterson-Todd. I'm on my iPhone. Please excuse me, but I've just been at the gym and I look a sweaty mess. So probably best if I stick off video for the moment. Just one question, Lewis, and I think this is probably difficult to answer at the moment. But, you know, just listening to what was said about revenue and, of course, revenue generation through car parking. And if you're looking at access charging, which is an understandable potential for the future, how's that going to be squared off if the access charging itself is put towards new transport systems? What happens to the hole that's created in parking revenues, which is actually one of the bigger amounts, obviously the larger amounts for the council?
Well, that's a good question. And we're already in play with Park Street, where work has only just started, and unavoidably that means that part of the city won't have a car park for a couple of years. but we're only going to start that phase after the Christmas season. So that, as an example, is a car park that will come back 2/3 of the size. So I do think that we will be reviewing and repurposing. So we will need to get the benefit of the assets for the community in a different way, Jane. So I think you can expect 1 or 2 car parks to be identified over the next year, where we will need to look at other uses. There'll still be a need for access in car parks, but it will be a lesser amount. So we fully support the work that the Greater Cambridge Partnership is doing, but it's going to be down to the views of travellers and the public and the partnerships with people like Stagecoach and others. But yeah, it will have an impact on the city's income, but we have to adjust to a net zero approach and a different way of raising funds. I hope that helps, but we'll be happy to provide further information. So some of our car parks will not be used as much, and those assets will have to earn money in a different way for the community.
No, thank you, Lewis. Yeah,
Lewis, David Bowden from Stagecoach each has a question, and then Vic Annals. They were in that order.
Okay, thanks.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me okay? I just wanted to share 2 interesting potential statistics. First of all, to highlight the fact that we are currently operating electric buses, and in conjunction with the GCP have just secured a Zebra bid for 30 new electric buses to add to it. But on the issue of congestion, has anyone ever considered how much the economic cost of congestion is to bus services? To give you an example on a hypothetical service, if a bus is held up in traffic so that its average speed drops from 15 miles per hour to 10 miles per hour, to operate that service per day, it would cost another 4 buses to do it, and an extra £2,100 worth of cost. So to give you an idea of, obviously, the powerful economic cost in trying to make bus services sustainable of traffic congestion, and that's a challenge we face. And can I also highlight, I picked up the question about tickets and ticket offers. We have actually piloted in Cambridge a brand new approach to tickets. We recognise that people are only travelling certain days back into businesses, so we've come up with a Flexi 5 and a Flexi 10 ticket, which gives people either 5 or 10 day tickets and a massive discount, which they can use over the space of a year. And would love to chat further to anybody who wants to explore that. But we are finally also very, very passionate about engaging effectively with businesses and with customers to ask the fundamental question of, are we providing the service that you want? Because going forward, to make bus services sustainable, we need to know exactly what people's transport needs are. And particularly a lot of the rural bus services, where the timetables have been like that for years, we really do want communities to approach us and say, are they still meeting their needs? And what can we do as Stagecoach to address those needs better? So I just wanted to highlight a couple of points, if that's okay.
Lewis, you're on mute.
So yeah, thanks for that, David. And clearly, it's a critical partnership with Stagecoach on there. I think Vic wanted to come in with another question and point.
Thank you very much. Yeah, Vic Annals from the Chambers of Commerce. Look, from my perspective, firstly, thanks for putting this event on, and it's great to be a part of it. And thanks for all you've done in recent years. And I look forward to working with Anna going forward. And David from Stagecoach, so it's great to have you on board as well. One of the challenges I don't know how we go about dealing with is the fact that people wish to travel less and spend more time working from home, but still have access to the same level of transportation infrastructure. And of course, if people are only choosing now to use vehicles 3 days a week instead of 5, unless transport companies are only going to provide a Tuesday to Thursday service, we are going to face a greater challenge economically in making these things cost effective. Any thoughts from the council about how you're going to approach that? So, still the same numbers required because you've got the morning peak, the evening peak, but what are you going to do if there are less people wanting to travel overall?
Well, I think the initial response is evidenced, Vic, by the congestion that we're already suffering. So if you look at the peak times, particularly the south of the city, we are already overloaded again in terms of the number of people who are moving by way of cars. So I think we already had built into the system growth that's been happening in terms of the number of jobs and employment. So whilst you're right that quite a lot of more people are working from home, the evidence at the moment is that we are the road system is beyond capacity at peak times. So I think the wish to reduce cars further, effectively to figure lower, I think the original target was 15% lower than the levels of cars in 2011. That objective is still there. So I think personally, and David might have a different view, that the volume of bus user will increase. I don't know, David, if you see through the proposals that are in from the Greater Cambridge Partnership, clearly you won't have as many buses stuck in congestion, but you would see a significant rise in ridership.
That's our hope, Councillor Lewis. But key to that though is making sure the bus is the economically, the primary method of people wanting to travel into the city, or one of the other sustainable modes that we can link in with. I think certainly the City Council, it's good that car parking charges are at a high level, within the city centre. That's the first economic, disincentive to people to hopefully instead consider a sustainable way forward. But I do think crucial to having that growth is, again, going back to that question of local communities being very active, because we would never ever go to somebody and say, do you want a bus service? Because everyone says, yeah. What we need is my travel needs between here and here in the city are X. I need to be there 4 days a week. I need to be there at these particular times. And then we can go away and look at the services we're providing and say, is that still meeting people's needs? So I think, yes, I celebrate the very ambitious, and it's great to hear, the Mayor having the courage to talk about road pricing and pollution charging. But I think, as well as that ambition, we need the communities to help us with, because people's transport needs evolve over time. People's needs are never static. So we're very passionate at Stagecoach that we want to offer a network that continually goes back to customers saying, what are your needs and how can we evolve our offer to meet those evolving needs?
I think another part, Vic, is that in terms of the network at the moment, the funding doesn't target at improving the feed-in and the time. So we've got a lot of people, including Hills Road and other students needing to get into college or to the CRC, and then the network just isn't there. So I do think that if we've got a better network, then we're going to see more people, including many people who've never been on a bus in the last 2 or 3 years, seeing the benefit. And at the moment, if you're on a bus, you end up being on a bus stuck in congestion, and even less flexibility than if you've got a vehicle. So, I think that the dialogue's there being promoted by the Greater Cambridge Partnership, and I do think that this is, as I put up on the slide, it's not just a current consultation until Christmas. There's going to be a further big dialogue through 2022, and it does. There's no point in raising money unless it's completely hypothecated to be guaranteed to be used on transport, and also that it has to be targeted very carefully. because we will increase ridership on a number of routes, and that will help Stagecoach and other operators keep them viable. But I'm sorry, we ain't going to get to the full Monty on that discussion, but there are going to be other opportunities. Ahmed, you wanted to come in, and I do plan, I'm afraid, to close the session at 7:30, including because I think many of you have worked a long day. But Ahmed, do you want to come in?
Hi, thank you very much for giving me the speech. Thank you very much for the nice meeting tonight. It was very helpful. So I just have a question regarding the taxis. Previously, the Cambridge City Council used to give a funding for people changing their vehicles from diesel or petrol to electric, and this funding has been stopped now. Is this gonna be coming back, the funding for taxis to change to electric? That's my first question. And the second question is, I mean, we are talking about greener city, but we still allow Wolverhampton plated taxi, private hires, and South Cambridge plated private hires to flood our city and operate in a regular basis in our city. We still allow them to use the bus lanes as well. Why don't we stop the bus lanes and the bus gates and allow only Cambridge City licensed taxis to use them? Thank you very much.
Yeah. So we've got a more detailed response to your very important questions. I mean, we're operating in a national environment, and whether people set up as Uber or whether Wolverhampton plated taxis operate in Cambridge is not something that we can control. But what I suggest, Ahmed, along with others on the call who are from the taxi licensed group, that we just have a discussion and meeting with you, Ahmed, because you did raise some important points. And we would also include South Cambridgeshire in that discussion because some of those issues affect them.
Thank you very much. That will be really nice to have a private meeting with yourselves. That will be really beneficial, I think. Thank you very much for that.
Well, thank you. And if we've got a detailed response which we'll share tomorrow, but we'll invite you to come to a discussion. I mean, we've got a very committed team in the city, and yeah, there isn't city funding for helping taxis convert, but a number of these questions kind of didn't get addressed in the national budget, if I might be blunt, and there wasn't any. Some of us were expecting some extra announcements when the Prime Minister was in Glasgow, and I didn't hear much in terms of specific interventions. So I'm proposing to bring the session to a close, and I'm sorry if you have got a question, by all means email it to myself, lewis.herbert, etc. We will bring up a summary and share that along with the presentation to you all. So we will record the exchanges and the links, including a number provided by Cambridge Clean Tech and others in terms of answering it. I do urge you to have a look at the proposed events, both on the Greater Local Plan that's on the planning website and also the ones that the GCP is organising. So in closing, I just reminded to thank all of our staff and all of you for what you've contributed over the last very difficult 20 months. I know how many of our hundreds of staff have just pulled out extra. I know how tired a number of them are because a lot of people have not had anything like a normal existence, just in the nature of the way things have gone. And I know that goes for a lot of you too. So I think we are all going to need something of a break before we feel like normal human beings again. But in a way, it's been cheering that the economy has recovered and that as a city we've shown such great resilience. and there are parts that are not as resilient, and we will be there to help people and to work on the city centre's recovery and continue success and to overcome the challenges that we've discussed. Naomi, did you just want to have a quick word before we close?
I think it was more to sound a note of caution, and just give an open question, which is that during my day job, and particularly the training sessions I'm going on with other employers on return to work and new working patterns, I'm just not hearing much certainty. And I was quite interested in the contrast between that and the very strong response in favour of less office working. And so this is really just an open question to businesses attending. How certain are you of your post-COVID work patterns, and particularly the travel patterns, and when do you think they're going to solidify?
We'd certainly welcome, I mean, we will ourselves be undertaking quite a lot of work on that, including as part of the local plan, but we definitely need to understand from those on the call and from the really impressive networks that the Chamber, the FSB, Cambridge Network, Cambridge Ahead and others represent, to get a bigger picture of that. And I think Jane Patterson-Todd put up that they've got a report coming out early 2022 on quite a lot of that. So we do need to understand how work is changing. So thank you for all your contributions. I do hope that you found it at least good use of an hour and a half of time that you volunteered on top of an existing working day. So we welcome all of the contributions you've made, and we thank you for your warmth and partnerships in so many different ways. The challenges haven't gone away. We've got some different ones. We're a lucky city, but we've got a lot of issues to address. And as I think we've underlined several times, we can only do this together. And that is not us shirking our responsibility, but it is welcoming the fact that as a city, we're something of a village in some ways, and we do get on and sort things out together. And we've got a bit of that to do. So thank you for all your input. I will sign off. I hope you have an enjoyable rest of the evening. If there's anything that you want to be in touch with me until the 30th of November, please email me. And then my deputy has the pleasure, Anna Smith, of taking over from me and leading our team, working with Robert Pollock, who's been on the call, our chief executive, and several hundred staff who work their socks off for our city from when we get up in the morning until when we get to bed. So thank you for your time. Look forward to talking to you all. Do email us if there's an issue that you want to follow up. Good night.